everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Weighing In with Andy Hamilton and David Mirikitani. I'm Andy Hamilton, coming to you from the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum in Waterloo, Iowa. Joined on the other line, as always, by my co-host, David Mirikitani. David, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. How are you?
Doing great. Yourself?
I'm off the island. The water has gone away, so I'm happy. So
good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
You were listening to our show last week. David's house was surrounded almost by water down in the St. Louis area there. Good to hear that that things are receding down there. So
I'm back on the loose.
Awesome. Well, hey, we've got a little bit of wrestling stuff to talk about this week. Pan Am Championships are in the books. European Championships are in the books. A couple things from a roster standpoint. A couple changes there on the college end that we can talk about. But David, where do you want to start this thing? You want to start it with Pan Am?
Yeah, let's start there. That kind of makes sense.
Okay, well, little recap. The United States won 11 golds in all three styles combined this past weekend in Brazil. 5 golds in freestyle, 2 bronzes, 3 golds as well in Greco and women's freestyle. Did you get a chance to watch much of it, David?
A little bit, yeah, sort of bits and pieces. I mean, it seemed overall like pretty much, and I'm not worried, or not that it matters what I think, but like I'm not worried about this guy, but pretty much besides Stieber, people either wrestled to for the United States, wrestled to or exceeded expectations, which is good. I mean, it's not a huge tournament, right? The numbers aren't real deep. A lot of guys started in the semis to begin with.
Yeah, it's I think most everybody got 3 or 4 matches from the United States. I know Kyle Rochelle got 3. James Green got 4. I think Kraft got 4. I want to say Snyder got 3. So most of them got 3 or 4.
Yeah, maybe it was only Dom that was already in the semis. You're probably right.
So pretty dominant showing. Like I said, 5 golds, 2 bronzes out of the 8 weight classes. 20-4 in matches for the U.S. freestyle team. 17 techs, a pin. Match points, 212-41 in favor of the United States. So pretty absurd statistics there. I tweeted that out Sunday night. And Tony Ramos asked, he goes, so are we really good, or does this show how weak the Pan American countries are, minus USA, Cuban, and a few U.S. individuals? And I think a little bit of both. I mean, you look at some of these weights, 65 kilos, for example, the one weight where the United States didn't place, seems like the past 4 or 5 years, with Brent Metcalf at that weight class, there'll be some pretty good scraps with Franklin Gomez and Heisland Garcia and, some other guys as well. And that was the case this weekend. Gomez was the silver medalist. Russell finished, he lost in the bronze medal match. But that was one weight where it's a little deeper. 74 kilos, probably not quite as deep. 57, probably not quite as deep. But I think on a case-by-case basis, there are some weights in there a little strong, a little bit better than others. And by and large, though, I think that at least from where I sit, the USA Wrestling men's freestyle program is certainly heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time talking about the Open last week, and I don't want to do an exact count, but some of the guys that won the Open were on that, some of them weren't, and like Rochelle wrestled really well at 74 kilos, but he's pretty far down the ladder when you look at the rankings and stuff like that. So, like you said, maybe that's a weight that wasn't as deep, but then when you have a guy like Stieber who's a world champion and losing a high-scoring match. It's probably like any of us that wrestled. Some tournaments you go to and, everybody else had a tough tough road to hoe, and I kind of got an easy draw, and then there's other ones where a bunch of your teammates kind of cruise, and you run into the two studs from the other team. So I completely concur, though. It feels like kind of now that USA knows that Zadok's in charge, and all that transitioning stuff is over, and programs being put in place, that it certainly seems like the USA's got a bright future ahead, especially in freestyle. And I think women in Greco had a good showing, and Greco really needed a good showing, so that's positive.
Yeah, and I think you look at the age division success that the United States has had here in the last few years. Spencer Lee, Gable Stevenson, Mark Hall, Dayton Fix, Kyle Snyder and what he's done. I mean, just I could go on and on and on about the young guys in the program and how they've done on the world level. But we're seeing success like we've never really seen before at the age division levels, and I think it bodes well. It certainly bodes well for the long-term future of the men's freestyle program in the United States. And as you mentioned, things are pointing, the arrow's pointing up for women's freestyle as well, with Helen Maroulis and what she accomplished. Adeline Gray, multiple-time world champion. Seeing some young women in the United States that are really starting to have success on the world level too. And I think we're going to see a huge run over the course of the next 15, 20 years, just because of the growing popularity of girls wrestling now. One of the fastest growing sports at the high school level in the United States. You combine that with the groundbreaking accomplishment of Helen Maroulis winning Olympic gold. I think that there is going to be a huge boom for girls freestyle wrestling, or girls wrestling in the United States, and that's going to bode well for Terry Steiner's program as well.
Yeah, and when all of us that have wrestled, the life lessons you learn, the things that make you tough, the friendships you build, the memories you have, none of those have anything to do with being a guy or a girl. They're people lessons. So, I think all of us, guys like you and me that love wrestling, we want as many people to experience wrestling, and I'm sure why you love it and your life experiences are different than mine. They have to be, obviously, but, whether you're in St. Louis or in Iowa or any part of the country, and whether you're a guy or a girl, wrestling's just an awesome sport and an amazing metaphor for life. And, it's that Gable quote of, once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And, it's kind of super big picture, but I do think wrestling is such a great sport for that. And the fact that we got more young ladies doing that is really, really positive for sure. And it'll help. It helps with the Title IX argument and those other things that we've dealt with that we feel like people are hiding behind it. It takes that argument away for sure.
Yep. So anything else you want to hit on Pan Ams? You want to move on to Euros?
Yeah, tell me about Euros. I know that I saw the one match that we were talking about off air, but, there was just some amazing wrestling, right?
Yeah. And to rewind a little bit, combine both Pan Ams and Europeans. If you get a chance, go on to Track Wrestling if you haven't already done so, and read the takeaways from Seth Patera, who covers international freestyle wrestling for us. Seth, his knowledge of guys on the international level is staggering.
Insane, yeah.
And he's been great for us. He's been a rock star for us, being able to tell us, and break down who are the guys to watch. What are the important areas that you should keep an eye on? What are the important things to watch, going into all these UWW tournaments? And then what are some of the key developments coming out of them? Seth broke it all down, going into Pan Ams, going into Euros, coming out, takeaways out of both of them. He's going to have more stuff up this week with the Asian Championships, which will get going here today over in India. And so I encourage you to check that out if you're into the international stuff, and lots of good stuff there. But as you're mentioning, the 61 kilo European final was one of the best freestyle matches you're going to see this year. Vladimir Kinchishvili of Georgia, the two-time world and Olympic champion, falls behind 5-0, gets tossed, and falls behind 5-0 against Ahmed Chikayev, of Russia.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, Chikayev was, common spelling for Kinchishvili, right?
Exactly.
Chikayev. So Kinchishvili falls behind 5-0 against Chikayev. Chikayev, if you remember, wrestled Logan Stieber in the World Championships last year, ended up being the world bronze medalist at 61 kilos. Chikayev gets off to a 5-0 start. Kinchishvili comes storming back. Just a terrific, action-packed match. The kind of stuff that the sport needs to protect itself and thrive, I think, in the long term. When you look at the Olympic future and, trying to really anchor in for 2024 and beyond, it's matches like that are gonna keep wrestling alive and thriving at the Olympic level and world level. You saw the big throw, you saw the great comeback, you saw action nonstop, two extremely talented wrestlers, and it goes down the wire. David, you got a chance to watch that one, you said?
That match I did see. I mean, so many people were texting me about it, and obviously we had it. And it's just, I think first of all, that skill level at those guys' level is so insane. And normally, you know how that goes. Like, I don't care how it happens. If I reach back and headlock you for 5, I don't care if we're playing tiddlywinks. That's just really hard to come back from. And those guys just battling like that, like you said, it's those are the kind of matches that make people wrestling fans, that maybe weren't, and people like us that are, like people that are nerds and love this stuff. It just makes you love it even more. So it also is a very good sort of compare and contrast to, like you said, well, how, you and Ramos were talking about, well, how good is the U.S. and how weak are the Pan Ams? Those are the guys, and when you were talking about the summary that track wrestling is doing, even if you're not hardcore in the international scene, that's what's great about the kind of people we have working at track. They can give you that really, really intelligent Reader's Digest version. And so when you go to the World Team Trials, whoever wins, who they're going to run into. And I know we'll have more stuff like that out, sort of what we do on a smaller scale with the NCAAs, and have somebody like Seth that's so intelligent at that level. For those of us that don't follow international wrestling and know who like the 23rd ranked guy in the country is, like you and I do in Division I, it's really great to be able to see those kind of things and just break it down. And, so when you go to watch the Worlds or the trials and all that, you kind of have a much more intelligent opinion based on what that guy's doing.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the things that's been really cool about wrestling here in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, you're seeing so much more stuff online. It's so much easier to find matches from, the off the beaten path places around the world. We're talking about, watching that tournament from Serbia in live time. And
right.
It used to be like the only time that, when I was, 15, 16 years old, growing up, even until then, the only time I got to watch wrestling live on TV was Iowa Public Television, 7 nights a year, 6, 7 nights a year. And now the amount of stuff that you can watch from your home is staggering. And I think that's cool. I think that we talked here a week ago, and I made the point, the wrestling is unlike any other sport, and that the higher you get on the ladder, the less exposure you seem to get, from the standpoint, the number of people that are in the stands at the U.S. Open and the World Team Trials, it pales in comparison to the number of people that are in the seats, in Carver Hawkeye Arena for a dual meet or Rec Hall for a dual meet or that's going to an Ohio State duel or whatever it may be. And I think that this is, I think in time, hopefully we're going to see some of these guys across the world, the Sagilayevs, the Kinchishvilis, Chikayevs, I mean, on down the line, that they're going to become more of the household name for not just the hardcore wrestling fan that's into the freestyle, because it seems like there's that faction of that kind of underground crowd that follows this stuff religiously. But I'm not sure how big that crowd is compared to the people that follow the college scene. I think it's a fraction of the people that follow the college scene, and hopefully here over the course of the next several years, and as these world events become more readily accessible from your home, hopefully some more people like this are going to become household names, that people across the United States are going to follow this stuff a little more closely. Because as you mentioned, the skill level is absolutely incredible. I remember going to the World Championships 2 years ago in Las Vegas, and I may have said this on this podcast before. The heavyweight semifinals 2 years ago were sub-minute tech falls, and these guys are unbelievable athletes at heavyweight, and just the positions that guys wrestle in and out of. It's mind-blowing to me to have seen it up close and in person, how incredible the talent level is at the highest level of sport.
It's insane. But the other thing that I talk to people every week about our podcast and, other points and whether they agree or disagree. And, we talked last week, I think my point was a lot of people root for the laundry and root for the team. And somebody else who I respect said, in a college season in wrestling, or like an NFL season, or a college football season, or whatever sport you like right now in the NBA playoffs, like there's a rhythm to it. There's a time to it. Like right now, anybody who likes basketball is inevitably thinks it's going to be the Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors in the finals. And, in college football, like every game's sort of a playoff. With this international or the freestyle and Greco wrestling in the United States and the international stuff, it just jumps up on you. Like you're done with D1s, and 5 weeks later, there's the Open. And then it's kind of in reverse. Now we're going to have a last chance tournament in 10 days where if you didn't do good enough, then you can get back in. It's just, it's hard to follow, and there's no build up to it. And, like the World Series, the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, probably the only sport that, has this thing where it just jumps up on you is like NASCAR, where the Daytona 500 is at the beginning of the year. And you probably know about that better than me because, you told me you've covered auto racing, but everything else, there's a build-up to it. I mean, you always know when the Super Bowl is. You always know when the World Series is, and there's always going to be, okay, well, these teams are in it, and then it comes down to this. And, the U.S. Open, half the time, 3 weeks ahead of time, you don't even know who's registered for the tournament. So it's really hard for the media to create storylines and talk about matchups where, picked one example. We talked about Gabe Dean and Bo Nickel for 5 months. And obviously, those guys are not Olympic gold medal good, but the build-up to that match is bigger than the build-up for that match will be bigger than the build-up for David Taylor possibly winning the tournament and wrestling Jaden Cox.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's nothing against the first two guys, but they haven't accomplished, what Jaden has and what David Taylor is trying to get from him. So you've taught me this, that in your line of work, especially, you look for good stories, and to have good stories, you have to have time for them to build. And you have to have time for people to talk about them. It's not a good story if you're the only guy that thinks that. So, it has to be in people's awareness and just, I don't know what the solution is because, I know the people at USA Wrestling, and they're working their fannies off to, promote the sport. And it's tough because it's hard to promote the sport during collegiate season, because it's almost like their minor league system. And then you get done, and all of a sudden, here we go, U.S. Open 5 weeks away. And it's going to be even crazier if collegiate wrestling becomes a one-semester sport. It'll get even harder because the U.S. Open will be right around the same time as nationals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but you're right. I was at Vegas a couple years ago at the Worlds, and it's like, we all wrestled and we all think how good we thought we were, and you watch those guys, they're like 900 points better than I was. It's just like, it's frightening. They're so good.
And the point that I said to a couple people, like when I came back from it, and my first love growing up was baseball, and haven't played in that sport, you don't understand like how good those major leaguers are until you get up and you sit in the stands and you watch them take infield, or you watch those guys throw from the outfield or across the diamond, and how effortlessly those guys are throwing like 95 mile per hour speeds across the infield
on the paint if they're pitching too. Yeah.
and like those line drives that carry like 200 feet out into the outfield before they take a bounce, and they're like 6 feet high the whole way out there. You just don't understand how good those guys are until you see it in person. And that was the same thing that I said coming back from the World Championships. Like, you don't understand like until you're up close and seeing these guys in person, and how big and athletic those heavyweights are, and how fast a guy like Frank Chamizo is in some of the positions that those guys can scramble out of. It's mind-blowing to me. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, you've covered the sport a long time. I coach guys, and when I was coaching, wrestled with guys for a long time, and have run some of these events. So, literally put hands on guys and vice versa, and then right up next to it. And I think especially combat sports, it doesn't translate to video just how great these guys are. I mean, and you're right about baseball and all those other things, but it's kind of like watching a hockey game on TV versus being right next to the glass and watching these two just beasts going head first, smashing into the corner, and then just bouncing out of there like ping pong balls and just keep going. I mean, the athleticism is insane. And a lot of the coaches that I interview, I talk to them, and they're normal. What they're used to seeing is so abnormal. And that's what I talk to a lot of them about. I'm like, your guys, like Jay Jaggers, look who he's coaching every day in the room, all the Olympic medals, those kind of things, and national champions and everything else. And all the other programs we've been fortunate enough to talk to, like your guys, the brands. I mean, their normal is to be Olympic champions and world champions. But for a lot of us, that's a dream. And then to actually get to watch guys that good, like you're lucky if we can pull it up, on track wrestling. But to be that close to it, like you said, it's almost incomprehensible. Some of them are little nuances, what they do better, and some of them are just flat out better and better athletes and everything else. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's when you watch this level of wrestling, whether it's the U.S. Open, whether it's the Pan Ams, but as the farther you go up the food chain, the more you should have respect, and you should be impressed by just the level of skill and excellence that these guys are producing.
Well, we got some college stuff to talk about. You want to go to that now?
Yeah.
You want to go to?
Sure. There's sort of two things we saw, right? We saw Kevin Vo left Boise State, got out of his NLI and signed with Chris Bono and Reeder and Shop at South Dakota State. And then we saw Jose Rodriguez requested his release from Ohio State. And, I haven't seen anything on where he's going to go yet. And I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about, a couple rankings, weight classes, but, he's a guy that would be ranked in the preseason. It certainly makes the conversation more valid that Tomasello would drop to 25, Fletcher would drop to 33, Keyshawn Hayes would go to 41, and then, with the additions they've had at 57 and 65, like how stout that lineup would be, and how almost any other year they would be the preseason number one. So,
yeah.
I mean, you look at, I was talking to somebody last night, and they're going to have 5 guys ranked in the top 2, the Tomasello and then the last 4 weights. They're all going to be ranked 1 or 2. And then Micah's, I think, 3. And then they've got almost everybody else is going to be ranked at least like in the top 20, and they still can't beat 5-1s. And another kid, there's an argument to be made that he could be a number one. You know, at least not. They can't beat them. I'm just saying that on rankings they can't beat that. You know, so I mean it's just insane. So that dual meet though, if it goes out, if it shakes out that way, is I don't know if the schedule's out yet, and I don't know if they wrestle each other, but that's got to be the first dual meet you circle of the year. Those two schools.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, the matchups are insane in that duel. So.
Well, you've been working on rankings. You talk about rankings and stuff on paper. You've been working on them, kind of taking a preview run at this. You want to start with 25 and 33 today?
Yeah, let's just talk about those, and we won't put them out. This is just kind of more to talk about. I mean, I guess if anybody wants to hear about them or see a copy of them, they can, you know, send a note to Track Wrestling, and I'll forward them to them. But, yeah, right now, and this is the criteria that we used before and I used, and, you know, I know even in the beginning you didn't necessarily agree with it. It may not necessarily be right, but it's just the criteria. We put all the guys that placed last year ahead of anybody that didn't place last year. Then anybody who placed in previous years due to red shirts or injuries or whatever else. And then really it's, you know, then like round of 12, round of 16, round of 24s. And then, so there's some really, we'll talk about some red shirts, but they won't even be in the rankings right now, you know, at least initially this far out in May. So Darian Cruz, Ethan Lezak, Nick Piccinini, Jack Mueller, Sean Russell placed first, second, fourth, sixth, and seventh. So they're your top five. I made the judgment call to put Suriano in at 6. He's the guy that could literally make an argument for number one. He beat Cruz head-to-head. I just think that'd be incredibly disrespectful to Cruz to not have Cruz at 1. But clearly, we all saw how good Suriano was last year. Then Ryan Milhoff was 7th the year before for OU, and now he's at Arizona State. And then Zeke Moisey had that great run 2 years ago, where he took 2nd, was injured the year before, and redshirted this past year. So that's your top 8, and you have literally 7 All-Americans and a guy, even with the injury losses, that was the 3 seed going into nationals. Your guys 9 through 12 are 3 round of 12 guys: Sean Paws, North Carolina State; Brock Hudkins, Northern Illinois; Rodney Bresser, Oregon State; and then Shakur Laney was one of 2 guys in the round of 16. I ranked him ahead of Aiken because he placed head-to-head higher than him in the MAC. Then Aiken is next, who is a round of 16 guy. Then there's a ton of round of 24 guys. And this is where judgment comes in. You know, there's certainly some arguments, you know, for or against guys. But in no particular order, you got Josh Terrell from American, Travis Piotrowski from Illinois, Jose Rodriguez, who was at Ohio State. You know, we don't know where he'll be. Gabe Townsell, Stanford, Johnny Jimenez, Wisconsin, Jake Gramacki from Clarion. Then the guys who were around the 32, again, in no particular order: Christian Moody, Oklahoma; Elijah Oliver, Indiana; Noah Gonzer, Eastern Michigan; Brent Fleetwood, Central Michigan; Sean Nickel, Cal State Bakersfield; and Barlow McGee literally was the round of 33 guy because he had the pigtail lost and then lost in the pigtail on the back. But he was a guy that was round of 12 a year ago and just really kind of had an underwhelming season for him. Then besides that, that's 25 deep. Then you've still got guys like coming off of redshirt like Sebastian Rivera at Northwestern, Danny Vega at Iowa State, Kyle Nordstrom at Virginia Tech. You got 2 studs at Cornell and Noah Bauman or Dalton Macri. Pitt's got L.J. Bentley. Michigan's got Austin Acid coming off injury, and Zach Fuentes is coming back from Drexel. So I mean that's besides, you know, obviously the recruits, and freshmen generally have a bigger impact at these lower weights. So what do you think about that, Andy?
Well, the first thing that stands out to me is Barlow McGee at 25 is kind of startling because what, you know, and I can maybe rewind in our sheet here and see, now maybe not, maybe they're all gone by now, but.
No, he started the year at 6.
6. Yeah.
Yeah.
Started the year at 6 after beating Kreiser in the All-Star Classic, and I
losing him, lost to Kreiser.
Oh, that's right. He lost.
Yeah.
Lost to 1-0, right, or 2-0, I think it was.
Yeah. Something like that. He got the only takedown and got rode out 3-2. Kreiser had 2 escapes in riding time. Yeah.
All right. Yep. All right. Yeah, my memory's failing me already, but that was a little startling to see him at 25, but that's the way the season ended up for him. I'm curious to see if he's going to bounce back. I mean, if having the off season to hit the reset button and just be able to start over next year, clean slate. If we see Barlow McGee on the stand, next March, I think he's certainly capable if he can have a healthy season. I don't know about you, but he's been in the mix. He's certainly been in the mix, and that's a guy that Missouri's losing some firepower, and that's a guy that has to come through and be on that stand, for Missouri to be a factor in the team race in the trophy race next year.
Yeah, and it also shows you that Jose Rodriguez, based on where we have him, he scores 1.5 points plus obviously any bonus, plus obviously he could do better, so he could be an impact guy for wherever he ends up. And then the other, I always look at like how many All-Americans are in that weight, and really it's 7.5. I don't think it doesn't matter if you love or hate Penn State or Soriano. I think it's hard to imagine if he was healthy that he didn't, on his worst day, take 8th last year. And that's probably an insult to that kid based on how his season was going. So, realistically, he was the top 1, 2, 3 guy. So you have 8 All-Americans. It's a pretty stout weight. When guys like Foz and Hudkins and Bresser and Laney are knocking on the door, and like you said, when Barlow McGee's 25th, it's a pretty good weight. So you want to dig into 33 a little bit?
Yeah, and I think maybe a good segue is the point you brought up with Tomasello. If he goes down to 25, wherever he goes, he's going to be ranked
2.
Probably
he'll be ranked
first
2 either way.
Second, yeah, yep. So
yeah.
Interesting. The guy's lost 2 matches in 2 years, and both have been in the semifinals. Corey Clark and Thomas Gilman. So
Iowa guys.
Yep. And so talking about a guy who's had an incredible career to this point, 1-3-3, and the third place finishes 2 losses in 2 years. So that's going to be a difference maker wherever he goes. He's going to be in the race for a title, obviously. But it'll be compelling to see where he winds up and how that Ohio State lineup, how the pieces fit together.
Yeah, for sure. So 33, there's 5 returning All-Americans: Seth Gross, South Dakota State 2nd, Nathan Tomasello 3rd, Stevan Misick 4th, Cade Brock 5th, Scotty Parker 8th. Then you have 3 round of 12 guys: Brian Lantry, Buffalo; Mitch McKee, Minnesota; Scott Delvecchio, Rutgers. Then you've got 4 round of 16 guys that end up being ranked 9 through 12: Dom Forrest, Pitt; John Ernesty, Mizzou; Josh Albert, Northern Iowa; Jamal Morris, NC State. Although, talking to Beasley, Morris will go up to 149, so we'll probably make that adjustment later. But then round of 16 is interesting. You have Corbin, or not, the guys ranked 13 through 16, around to 24 guys. Corbin Myers, Edinburgh; Connor Schramm, Sanford, who was 8th 2 years ago, or 8th a year ago, Cam Sikora, North Dakota State. And then Colby Smith, who transferred from App State to Mizzou. So I left him in here for now because we're not publishing these. But Mizzou has the number 10 and number 16 guys in the country on the roster, at least in my ranking. Then the 2 other round of 24 guys are Austin Eicher, Michigan State; Pat Darcy, Princeton. Then your round of 32 and 33 guys are Chris Devian from Chat, Anthony Titolo from Kent State, Alex Madrigal, Old Dominion; Rico Montoya, Northern Colorado; DJ Feldman, Lock Haven. And then guys that were ranked some during the year, guys like Cam Kelly from Ohio, Luke Welch from Purdue, a guy like Ali Nazer from Arizona State, who's got wins over Coleman Scott and John Morrison, Dennis Gustafson from Virginia Tech. And then you got guys like Taylor Lamont coming off a redshirt at Utah Valley, Montorie Bridges off redshirt at Wyoming. Rudy Yates, who's at Northern Iowa, who's, that's interesting because he's going to be pushing Josh Albert for that spot. Tariq Wilson in North Carolina State, who looks like he'd be the guy to step in for Morris. Philip, how do I pronounce the kid's name from Iowa, the last name? Philip Laux, is that right?
Philip Laux, yeah, Laux, yep.
Laux. And then Jared Cortez, Penn State, Nathan Boston Campbell, Mickey Philippi, Virginia, Tyshawn White, Lock Haven, Dylan Duncan, Illinois. So this way feels like it's really deep. We named 33 guys, and some of them are not going to even probably qualify for nationals, but it's not as deep at the top in terms of having a few less All-Americans.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And it seems like, this was a weight where we saw a lot of movement. It seems from probably about 10 on down to 25 this year.
Sure.
That crowd that, Schramm was in, Jamal Morris, Albert, Ernesty, Earl Hall, all the way down to 25, and, Cam Kelly in and out of the rankings. So, as you mentioned, there's a ton of guys back right there. And that's not really getting into the potential guys that could step in. As you mentioned, the freshmen that could step in, the guys that we haven't seen on the mat in their lineups yet that will certainly make an impact. You mentioned the Northern Iowa situation. That's one to keep an eye on. Missouri. It'll be fascinating to see some of those MAC battles to make the lineup.
Northern Iowa is going to be tough because I think they've both taken a redshirt year. I think Missouri will redshirt Colby Smith just because he hasn't. But you're right. That's, and there's, when we get into some of these other weight classes going through, we're probably not even mentioning, you look at when we talk about 141 next week and how good Oklahoma State is at that weight. They got three guys that probably could be ranked in the top 12 in the country. So,
yep.
And that's not to discredit any of these other schools. It's just that's such a blatant, display of powerful depth there that it deserves mentioning. But this is another weight where it feels like, and you and I keep track of this document, and it's kind of cool the way we do it, where we can see where guys were ranked every week and kind of who trended up or down. And you look at an Ernesty, and he wasn't even on the board for 8 or 9 weeks, and then he pops in at 19 and worked himself all the way up to 10 or so by the end. And I think those are the kind of guys that if you're coaching them, you're like, we can't wait to get those guys back on the mat because they were trending the right way. So it's another really interesting weight. And obviously, the weights so far we've talked about have huge impacts on the team race. If Tomasello goes to 25, that, theoretically bumps all those guys down a spot, and then it bumps all these other guys up a spot. And, if you're an Oklahoma State guy, and now Tomasello theoretically is gone and Cade Brock's ranked third, to have to not wrestle Seth Gross again would probably be nice to be on the other side of the bracket of that theoretically. So, yeah, and I've worked on these. We're about 6-7 weights in, so we'll probably tackle 2 or 3 of these more next week, just depending on how slow the week in wrestling is. So,
well, anything else this week, David?
No, man, it kind of feels like the calm before the storm, right? Because, starting next month, you got World Team Trials, and you got Junior Duels, and then it's Fargo, and then it's preseason. I did want to mention Chris Roseman from the Sports Commission was on Mat Chat. I thought he did a really good job of explaining a lot of questions that I think people have. And Mark Manning will come out this Friday. He did a great job on his interview talking about James Green, Jordan Burroughs, the training situation there, University of Nebraska's team this coming year. I think he likes where his team is. I think he likes the fact that they're probably underdogs or underrated, or that people like us think they're going to take a step back, and I can tell you he doesn't think that. And then kind of what we can expect in Lincoln next month. So it was kind of a timely interview, and then we're going to interview 2 guys in the next week or so here that'll come on after, and I'm really excited about both of them. And one of them in particular is somebody we've been hoping to get for a long time. So I'm real excited about that.
Awesome. Well, hey, David, thank you as always.
My pleasure, Andy.
And this has been episode 3 of Weighing In with Andy Hamilton and David Mirikitani. Thank you for tuning in. Check back to Track Wrestling, as I mentioned, for all that coverage of the Pan Am Championships and European Championships. And you can look for David's Mat Chat coming out later in the week. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back again next week.
This show is part of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MatTalkOnline.com.